Hey folks, it's John here again from A's for Alcoholic. I hope you're all doing well. Today's conversation is with Brandy K, and she comes to us from a group called Boring Little Girls Club. And what is Boring Little Girls Club? They are a community of sober women, trans and non-binary folks who have fun without alcohol and recreational drugs. It's a social club, and through our conversation, a couple of things. The importance of socializing, and that it doesn't always have to be program-based. I think one of the things I took away and that I often forget is that our socialization doesn't always have to be over book study or whatever, your program might be, but that it can be about they do a clothes swap and they have coffee chats and all kinds of different stuff that they do, activities that don't always have to revolve around sobriety. But the important thing is that everybody there is sober curious, or looking to get sober in some way. And I also really appreciated our conversation today just because we come from such different backgrounds, and yet as she is telling her story, I am continually struck by how similar it is to mine. So, yeah, it was a pleasure. It was really great to talk with her and listen to her. It was very insightful talk. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Brandy K.
Well, Brandy, thank you for this. I appreciate your time. I know everyone's busy and there's a lot going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that always fascinated me about my alcoholism and my recovery was trying to trace back my own personal, what I call like my alcoholic lineage, in that when was the very first drink I had, but then not just that, but also when was the first time I was affected by alcohol or drugs? Was it something in my childhood? And so that's always my favorite question to ask somebody, is when were they first affected by alcoholism or addiction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, John. I grew up in an alcoholic family. It was very normalized for me from really the beginning of my life. In my family, you drank if you were happy, you drank if you were sad, you drank if it was raining. It was just one of the things that was always prevalent. However, I will say, I have to mention that it was the 60s, it was the 70s. And so social norms back then were pretty a little bit looser, I think, than they were. And so my first remembering of alcohol is just actually stealing people's beer bottles as a young child at parties that my parents were having. And it was kind of funny, it was like, oh, isn't she cute? And so that was always, it was a positive reaction. It was funny. And it didn't taste bad to me. I don't ever
Huh.
remember going, so that in itself probably says something. However, my first memory of actually getting drunk would have been at 9 years old. So
And what
my
happened
mom
there?
I'm sorry?
I just said, what happened there at 9 years old?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. My mom had remarried and there was a celebration happening, and I was allowed champagne, and I had too much because wow, did it taste good. Um, I just remember like, oh, it was just, my mom made fun of me because I actually said yummers and licked my lips like it was magic. So it was an ongoing joke for me around kind of growing up. Oh, yummers, hey, Brandy. And so, um, yeah, that just
Oh,
actually, speaks to kind of the normalization of alcohol within my family unit also. Because none of these at the time were negative experiences for me.
Sure, you get, I mean, especially getting that the adulation and the positive feedback for the behavior as a young child about, you know, oh, isn't that cute, grabbing beer bottles, or having it, now you have a you have a cute catchphrase attached to drinking at 9 years old. Yeah. Um, and so that's the first time. Do you begin, I mean, I don't know how a 9-year-old would drink regularly, but was there a period where you began to drink regularly?
I can say for sure, like the kind of the sneaking of alcohol and the binge drinking probably started around 13,
Mm-hmm.
14 years old. Um, I kind of got busted for it. And my family took the approach that they would rather have me do it in their home.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of allowed. My family home kind of became the place where all my friends could go and drink. And so, yeah, it just wasn't. It seemed like they just thought it was a normal stage of development, and I'm assuming it was for all of them, in their journeys.
Right.
So, as I speak about this, sometimes I see my face cringing a little bit, and it sounds like such an awful narrative of my family. However, I'm sharing this one side of it, and I just want to point that out. So,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, people are human beings and multifaceted and have so much
yeah.
good and joy. And I certainly would not blame somebody, you know, if that was the norm and that was seen as something that was just okay at the time.
Hmm.
Especially if, like you said, if that was in their development, and that's kind of these things that get passed down to our kids as behaviors around alcohol.
That's,
Um,
yeah, very well said. What we observe as children, we will generally repeat. So,
mhm.
mhm.
I see that a lot with myself. I mean, I see my dad all the time in little weird behaviors, and I'm going, hey, let's just, especially, and not all bad, but definitely, like, let's check that one, John. Let's be very aware of that one and not follow through. So 13 is that's like junior high school, 6th grade or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, about there for sure.
So you're drinking what, like every weekend at
I'm gonna say, yeah, every weekend for sure. It was just fun to party.
Mhm.
I will say though that right from the get-go, I never had an off switch. I was always the one who got inebriated to complete blackout.
Mhm.
That started right off from the get-go. Yeah, I never had an off switch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it yeah that and it just never becomes kind of you're experimenting. It's like those teenage years,
Mhm.
and I didn't recognize it then as a problem. It was like it kind of became more of a like, wow, can Brandy drink a lot kind of thing, and like a little bit again of a small social reward, right, for kind of being able to pack them back and keep up with the boys. So yeah.
Well, there's always, I mean, that's definitely especially when you say like keep up with the boys, as growing up as a boy, it was very much, and as a young man, a badge of honor with how much I could drink and how much and people around me would like, and some people would be like, yeah, that's great, and other people like, my God, are you okay? And so I completely understand the reward of it, and then it becoming, especially at that young age, did you find it to become part of your identity? I mean, were you into other things? Were there activities? Were there sports or hobbies? Or
No, not so much. I mean, what were hobbies for me? I was trying to think. Um, at the time, my high school offered an athletic first aid training course, so that was something I was kind of involved in extracurricularly. And there was a coach and a teacher that kind of always had an eye out for me. I will say that I moved a lot in those years. My parents were separated. I
Mhm.
went to 3 different high schools, and so there wasn't a lot of a time really for maybe a reputation or an identity. But I guess what happened was I always found my people, right? And it kind of goes to like what you were talking about as those people who are like, oh, hey, when you're just being silly and ridiculously drunk, and the other ones that you kind of scare and they're like, ugh. Those are the people you end up hanging out with, are the ones that are like accepting of your behavior, right? And
Yeah.
so I did, there was always people to gravitate towards, and being the new kid all the time, I don't know, I think that it was easy for me to kind of duck around and maybe not have as many eyes on me through those years as maybe normally would have had I been in the same place the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's just kind of like, oh, new girl, and so nobody really knows. And I always found too, and you when you talk about drinking in high school and at a very young age and finding your people, um, there's this feeling of, if I act out because it's been rewarded for so long, then I will be accepted. And so it becomes this, defense mechanism or coping mechanism for me to deal with making friends, or basically searching for maybe the love that I didn't get from my dad, in a really distorted way. And
Hmm.
I always found that to be something too, that there's this, well, look, John can drink a lot and he's a lot of fun, right? I mean, I don't know if you felt that way too, or you were just so much fun to be around, and hey, let's get Brandy and she'll do it. She'll drink it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate. I will, in my later on in my years, that kind of
Mhm.
it expanded from alcohol into other substances too, just because of that thing. Sure, Brandy will try it, right? So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and always being fun. I was never a downer when I was drunk. Never had bouts of anger or violence. And so grateful for that one, because that gets
Yeah.
people in a lot of trouble.
Mhm.
So,
So when does alcohol turn into other things? How long? So when you're drinking heavily in high school, how far does that go on for you until
yeah,
something else?
so yeah, interestingly enough, when I was 16, I started to recognize that drinking all the time wasn't normal. Yeah, I guess I'd been exposed to other people's families and maybe had some period of stability in my life. And yeah, my mom and I weren't getting along so good. And my mom was going through a lot in her personal life and making the decision to kind of drink daily to cope with how she was feeling. As a teenager, it just wasn't working. We were fighting, and I actually called the AA hotline. There was like a 1-800 number that I found in the phone book back then, and they referred me to a local outpatient addictions treatment center in my community. It was adult. They didn't have anything for youth back then. This would have been in the early 80s.
Mhm.
And so, and in my community, they didn't. But yeah, so I ended up seeing a counselor there. And of course, they asked me if I was drinking. And I was honest. I was honest. So I actually went through like a 6 or 8 week adult outpatient treatment program through the summer, which I hid from my mom.
Wow.
And it kind of just started me thinking about it's just not normal. However, was I willing to look at myself in that not normal? No, I was still in the like, well, it's not going to happen to me. It's just, it's that. Anyway. So the denial was still alive and well for my own experience, but recognizing the family and societal norms, or the family norms I grew up with, not okay, was around 16. Yeah.
And so you do this outpatient thing over the summer, and does it, but it, does anything stick, or do you feel, okay, well, maybe I've done this now? Is it a feeling of like, I've graduated from this, I finished this, now I don't have a problem anymore and I can go back to my behavior?
I think I had the mindset going in that it wasn't really my problem. I was there to try and learn about my mom and maybe how I could help her.
Okay.
I just wasn't there yet. I was 16,
Yeah,
so
sure.
yeah, it's one of those times.
And then how long do you continue to drink for? I mean, is this
Oh yeah, so I continue to drink actually until 28 years of age.
okay.
So I recognized my drinking as alcoholism at 21. However,
Wow.
was not prepared to do anything about it. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
dug in and gave this, well, I just kind of gave in and was like, so I'm an alcoholic, fuck it. Really, excuse the language. I
Mm-hmm.
just was like, let's just take this on a ride. And that's kind of when all the other substances came into my life also. I was kind of in a bit of a self-destruct mode, I think. Yeah, uh, didn't see it as that back then, just saw it as I'm going to party my face off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did that, and I did it globally. So in my addiction, I still managed to travel. I lived in Japan. I went to Korea.
Wow.
I lived in Australia. I also lived in San Francisco and Los Angeles during those years. So it's amazing what somewhat functional, or what people in active addiction, I should say, can actually accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And I also realize that there's a stereotype to that person, and if you don't outwardly carry that stereotype, you can fudge things sometimes until it starts to creep through the cracks, right? Which it always does,
Right,
always.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get away with it, and you can make it. I, one of the things that I think I learned in active alcoholism was the ability. So once you learn what an alcoholic, quote unquote, looks like, then you can learn to hide those parts. And I know that I did that a lot too, where I was very, even subconsciously to myself, manipulative in how I presented myself in certain ways and how I would dress or behave. Well, until I was completely blackout drunk, then it didn't matter anymore, and nothing mattered. And um so you talk about other substances, and you talk about being 21, and that sort of, I am resolved that I am an alcoholic, this is the way it is, and there's no changing it. um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to accept it and roll with it. um, so what leads you into what other substances, and how did you find yourself um, getting into those?
Well, I traveled to Japan in my early 20s, and ecstasy was just making it onto the scene. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was my first introduction into chemical drugs. And then, of course, cocaine followed. Um, uh, I had always done mushrooms. I shouldn't say always. As a teenager, I experimented with mushrooms and acid and those things. But yeah, I also would take prescription medications were introduced to me then. And so from about 21 to 28, I was, just taking anything and everything. However, cocaine became one of my better friends because my drug of choice was always alcohol. And
Mhm.
so I could be much more functional and I could drink more when I was using stimulants, particularly cocaine at the time. So.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I have very, now they're startling but very vivid memories of doing cocaine just so I could drink some more, just so I could quote unquote sober up and get through something, or the idea of rationing cocaine for the next morning. I don't know if you've ever had those moments too. And so it's always this, it gets so dirty and
Okay.
so gross. And at the time it was like, well, this is just, well, I'm going to need this because I'm going to have things to do the next day, or we have to go out and drink for the next 12 hours. So this is required. So,
Right? I mean, that
mhm,
was just how we did it.
mhm. And I remember the first time I ever did ecstasy and I was like, oh my God, where has this been? What is this? This is magic,
Yeah.
right? It was also one of the strangest and one of the worst hangovers too. It was pretty bad. Well, I mean, there was everything coupled with it, right? When you start mixing and you talk about, well, we just kind of did whatever. And, and that was very much, oh, somebody had some surgery and it's got some old pain pills. Well, yeah, sure. Why not? Why wouldn't we? I mean, no big deal. Let's try it. It's fun. We're experimenting. This is life, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so as you continue down this, are you seeing at any point, are you seeing problems after you've, accepted that you're an alcoholic and you've accepted that you're just going to live this way? Do problems arise, or are you just having fun in Japan?
No, well, I went from Japan. I moved around a lot. So I worked a summer job, and so in Canada, and so I went from Japan to Canada to Australia to Canada to San Francisco, and attempted to go to design school there, and I made it for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But in San Francisco, crack cocaine was introduced to me, so that kind of interfered with things greatly. And quickly, though, that one, I snapped out of that one pretty quick because I got myself in some pretty gnarly situations that were very dangerous.
Yeah.
And yeah, smartened up out of that, but it still didn't smarten me up to look at the rest of my behavior, which is really
Mm-hmm.
shocking. But yeah, so then, what happened was the sobering moments was about 26, 27. It got to the point where I was no longer functional and I lost my job, I lost my apartment, and I was couch surfing. I was still looking okay, but honestly, the drugs and alcohol had started to take a toll on my physical appearance. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And so I used to get away with a lot because I looked cute and I could play the party role. But when people start seeing that wear and tear on you, and when you start looking like an addict, and you've got the shakes and you're way too thin, and it just got real ugly real quick. Well, maybe it doesn't seem quick to others, but when it started to go down, wow, did it go down fast. And
Yeah.
I will say that the moment that it took that dive was the moment I got up in the morning and there was alcohol left over beside my bed. And I was like, oh, I bet you that's going to help, right? And I drank the alcohol in the morning. And wow, did it help. Uh, But that quickly took me, because in my brain I was like, well, that fixes everything. That's just perfect. I've got a solution. And so that quickly took things to a dark place really quickly, because when you start drinking first thing in the morning and you have to sustain that throughout the day, things get real messy and you can't hide it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That that you, I am always amazed when I talk to somebody who has a vastly different life experience, and I'm hearing all these things, and it's exactly where I was. And drinking in the morning and just enough, and then trying to measure the doses and knowing things like I could have 2 beers. I'd have 1 beer so I could go back to sleep for a couple hours, and then I'd wake up and I'd have another so I could get ready for work. And then I was a bartender for many years, and so um it was like, if I have 1 shot of vodka every 45 minutes, I'll be okay. I'll still be able to function and I can drive home, which sounds insane. But so drinking the alcohol, you say, I found a solution. And how long does that solution last?
Well, I was homeless and couch surfing probably within 6 to 8 months after that.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't really take long, because I was already in full blown addiction. I just, yeah, the daily drinking ended got me fired from my job.
Mm-hmm.
So once that happened, it spiraled down really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And what was the moment where you finally said, or was there a moment where you finally said, this is not working anymore and something else, I should probably try something else?
yeah, it's a vague memory. I had just spent the weekend in Vegas with a bunch of friends and hadn't really, slept for days. Uh, I made a phone call home to my mom, and I told her that I needed to get on a plane and come home. And she didn't hesitate. Uh, and she got me a ticket. In all those years I had been traveling, those last 10 years, she never got that phone call. So yeah, I got my butt home. My mom was living on Vancouver Island at the time, and it was a bit bumpy. There's a bit of a story there.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was worried about me seeking treatment. My mom tried to help me. She wanted to try and manage my alcoholism. And it was really out of good intentions. Like, she tried helping me limit. She, all the rationalizing justifications, all the bargaining that we do as folks who are alcoholics or addicts with ourselves. She tried to do that with me
Mm-hmm.
because, she wasn't well herself yet. And so I had to really leap outside my family unit and to get the help that I needed. So there was a period of time when they just didn't understand, and we couldn't communicate for a little while. It brings up a lot of, whenever you talk about the fact that you don't drink, and you must see this socially, is that people it automatically causes people to reflect on their own habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they think you're sitting there in judgment of them, when it's like, dude, that's not what's happening at all. I just had to do this for me. Like, whatever's going on for you is whatever's going on for you. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, but it caused some alienation from the family unit for a bit. As I said, drinking was really a normalized behavior, and it took a while for some understanding to come between us all again.
And you say, my mother, when you say that your mother tried rationing, limiting, all these other things, and it's so fascinating to me. And when I hear this, and what I imagine is that she is trying to help you, and if she says you need to stop drinking, then that would mean that she would need to stop drinking, and that I mean, the level of the power that alcohol takes over, has over a person, that your own child, it's it's better that I try to fix my own child, or help my own child, not fix, but help, in a way that it will still allow me my addiction. And it's so
Yeah,
hard to hear, like, it's such a powerful drug.
it is. It really is. And I think what really, what I think about all the time is how socially normalized drinking is in our cultures. And,
Hmm.
well, in our culture, particularly North America. So, um, yeah, I think it just goes to show that piece of things, and how uncomfortable and how awkward it is for folks when you try to take away something that is like television or coffee, or those kinds of things for them. It just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. You become, when you tell people you don't drink, and they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, nothing? I work in a restaurant, and I don't make a big deal about it. I answer questions when asked, but I still have people who are like, hey, we got this wine in, and you should have a taste. You should taste this. And I go, "Oh, I'm not drinking today. No, I'm good. Thank you. You enjoy, and, but also that level of the self-reflection that other people get while drinking. And it's like, hey man, you do you. And I've had people come up and ask me about it later, and wanting to express some sort of interest in quitting. And I say, well, we can go to a meeting, we can talk. And inevitably, I mean, because the hardest thing, and I don't blame them, but the hardest thing is to take that initial step of action, right? So when we make a plan to go to a meeting or do something, and then they just never show up, or they don't, message me back or something like that. And I'm always like, it's totally cool. I totally get it. It's not easy, and it's terrifying.
It
So,
absolutely is terrifying. It is. It, yeah. And I don't know, it's terrifying. But I think I was, when everything else that you're doing isn't working anymore, and every day is basically like a living hell,
mhm.
and I think this is what is important for folks to know, is there's a big difference between alcoholics and problem drinkers, and we don't often talk about that a lot. And in your heart of hearts, you're going to know if you're an alcoholic, because it starts to take the central focus of your life, and it starts to just dictate everything. Problem drinkers, it can really wreck your life, but you have the ability to stop, take some time
Mhm.
for reflection on maybe your terrible actions, and maybe repeat the same mistake. But they're two different things. And so, yes, my drinking was always alcoholic. And so I think it's a really important distinction for
Sure.
people to make. However, uh, if you use alcohol as a way to cope with your life on a daily basis, uh, those are questions you might want to start asking yourself, right?
Certainly. Certainly. So, in this, you call your mom, you fly home, she tries to help. It doesn't work. Where did you ultimately find the help that you needed?
Yeah, I went and stayed with an old friend that I had worked that summer job up in Canada with. And I just honestly went down to the adult outpatient treatment center. It was in an old building, and I walked up to the second floor, and I was shaking like a leaf. My heart was pounding. Every ounce of me did not want to be doing this. I was humiliated. But I was desperate. I was broken. And I knew that the way that I was doing life wasn't working. I was actually only going to kill myself. Um, I knew that in my heart of hearts. So I went through treatment. I went through a women's treatment program. I then took the opportunity to stay in a group home for women in recovery for the next year of my life. And I took up all the counseling that could be offered to me. What came out of my healing, of course, and I think many folks will relate to this, is that I had a lot of adverse childhood experiences that contributed to my feelings of, all those deep, dark feelings we have that are painful to us, that we use alcohol to cope with. And it works in the beginning, it sure does. But it stopped working, and it only became a living nightmare for me. Alcohol became when you don't want to drink, but you have to drink, because if you don't drink, you're gonna feel real sick, and terrible things can happen. So it's a terrible place to be stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about I'm having flashbacks and thinking about, you say life, the way I was living life wasn't working anymore, and how alcohol most definitely at some point in your life and in mine was a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I have memories of some of the worst hangovers, in some of the worst pain, in the most self-destructive moments. And those moments, I don't ever remember thinking I should stop this. I only remember thinking that more alcohol was going to be the solution I needed today. And that the idea of a solution other than alcohol just was not anywhere near my head. And that it had to come to a point where, and that blows my mind today, that I would have those thoughts. But that's, what I'm hearing from you. um it's it's powerful stuff. When you get into this, you and it's a treatment center, and it's a woman's sober living house. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so I essentially became roommates with 5 other women who were in various stages of recovery from addiction.
Hmm.
And wow, it's very layered dynamics living in those situations. There was, yeah, I think I said 5 other women, and some would come and go. Some of them were also not successful.
Hmm.
And so those were the harder moments, or the biggest teaching lessons, is kind of losing someone back to their addiction. It's very sobering when you're in early recovery. And I think, that just goes, that piece of that is why some sort of community or recovery support in early recovery is so important, because it's so fragile in the beginning. And I
Hmm.
learned so much by, living and committing to recovery for the amount of time that I did. Now, is that everybody's journey, and can we all do that? No. No. And I don't recommend one way for any human. Whatever way you want to get well or sober, give it a try. Give anything a try, and don't give up trying, is all I
Hmm.
can say.
So how long have you been sober now?
Sober now. I got sober in 2002.
Okay.
So I will say that I had a wonderful run at sobriety. It was not a straight process. I relapsed, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago now. So I had a long time sober.
Wow.
I had been in the rooms of AA for a real long time. That was how I got sober. I credit AA for opening my heart and mind to the concept of a higher power, to helping me build and work on my spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I was very closed off to that. I was raised in a Catholic, kind of ex-Catholic family. And so, the word God was, yeah, and it had a lot of loaded connotations and it was a very, we were to fear God in my
Right.
house. So spirituality and God and religion, like in the beginning of AA, was really hard, but it's what got me open to exploring for myself what a higher power would mean to me, and that's the gift with AA. You get to choose,
Yeah.
and you don't even have to define it.
Yeah.
It just has to be something else. So yeah, AA was a long part of my journey.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I let my attendance slide as we do. I got busy with other life. I got to university. My mother got ill, and I was looking after her. And to be honest, after she passed, I did relapse. Um, it was an emotional overload, but I also hadn't been doing the work to support myself through that with my recovery, right? So I do take ownership over that relapse. However, had I not gone through that, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I'm pretty solid in my recovery. I have zero questions now if I'm cured, if I ever get to enjoy a drink again. I have no doubt in my mind that I am an alcoholic. I will always be an alcoholic. But I had to go out there and, just give it another whirl. Because after, I think it was 14 or so years,
Yeah.
maybe. I let my
Yeah.
mind, my thinking, because I had moved away from my recovery supports, I let my thinking comes back. Your thinking always comes back and gets you. So just remember that, everybody, because yeah, it did. And my brain convinced me it would be okay to drink again. And I knew it wasn't.
Stop thinking. Um, so can I ask you, do you have a strong definition of your higher power? Or is it, because mine is it's still very vague to me, and I still work on trying to figure out something, but I'm always curious, and you don't have to share if you don't want to. It can be private
Yeah.
for some people too, but
I went on such a long journey with that. Because for me, I just had to know, I had to understand. And so I studied First Nations mythology and spirituality. I studied Buddhism. I studied Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu principles and philosophies of life. I practiced yoga. I practiced Tai Chi for some time. There was all kinds of things I looked into. And the more I tried to define it, the less I knew I could, and
Mhm.
the more I just became okay with that.
Yeah.
It's bigger than me. It's bigger than this small mind of mine. It really is. And so I have let that go, and I just it's a felt sense for me. I think more than anything, when I know that I'm taking care of myself in a healthy way so that I can connect with my spirit, to the world
Mhm.
around me. That's important. And, there's a lot of things I have to do to keep my spirit, myself well,
Right.
holistically. There's lots I do.
Right.
And, whether that's a curse or a blessing of being in recovery, you can choose to decide what that is for you. I
Mhm.
find having to do the self-care that I have to do to be the best I can be in this world now is it's a gift. However, I got to stay on top of it, because when I don't, yeah, things start to slip. I don't
It's
have the luxury of letting it slide.
right. No, I hear you. I mean, it's the same thing we were talking about it the other day about just you can't leave the dishes in the sink for, forever, right? Eventually they're gonna get crusty and old and moldy, and they're gonna attract ants, and then you're gonna have an infestation. And so I think about that as a metaphor for my sobriety sometime. And so, okay, well, did you clean out the sink? Did you do the laundry? You can't just let dirty laundry pile up. And so there's these level of maintenance. And whatever that is, that's different for a lot of people. That's going to meetings, that's right, that's journaling and whatever else, helping other alcoholics, whatever. Uh, you know, but it's been vital to my recovery. It's just like you say that, taking care of it, being on top of it, not forgetting it, and that there are going to be things in our lives that test that, and we don't, even if we fall or drink, it doesn't mean it has to be the end. It doesn't mean that those tools, I think about that too. All those years, did you think that, oh well, I've lost all of those years, or do you look at it and say, well, I had learned all those tools so that when this moment came, I was able to use them again?
In the beginning, because we want to punish ourselves. In the
Mhm.
beginning, I was just like, I've just screwed everything up. I've lost everything. I just catastrophized and made the biggest, just had to drag myself down to the lowest denomination where I would let
Mhm.
myself kind of lift myself back up. And no, I didn't lose all those years. And yeah, I had a wealth of tools and a wealth of information to fall back on. And I had a whole community of support to fall back on, right?
Mhm.
Even if I hadn't been there, for over a year and a half, they were still there, and they're always there. And it doesn't even matter if you recognize a face in the room, they're going to be there for you. And so I think that is a key aspect about recovery, is community.
Yeah.
Cannot do this alone. And whatever that community looks like for you, find it.
Yeah.
And let them know what's going on for you and where you're at and what you need. Because yeah, without outside help and outside support on my entire journey since 2002, I wouldn't be where I was at today. Um, and I'm feeling pretty happy and pretty solid in my recovery, and I have a lot of amazing things going in my life that, had I gone on my initial hint of just like, fuck it, I'm an alcoholic, let's just ride this out, I wouldn't have had all of these amazing opportunities in my lifetime, right? So
Mhm.
um, I know it feels really dark for people, and when they're stuck, but find your community, find
Yeah.
what's going to work for you, and just keep trying.
You talk about the community still being there, and it always reminds me of, I think it was in my first year of sobriety, and I didn't jump right in. I had to be dragged, and I had to take my time, but there was a period where I was working nights, and I was going to one meeting a week, and I was like hanging on for dear life with that meeting, and I just hated it. I hated going, and I was done with it, and I was developing a resentment toward AA itself and the meeting. And I said, you know what, I'm not going anymore, and nobody can make me. And nobody was there to make me. I was having that argument in my own head. And so I quit for 2 or 3 months or something like that. And then I remember thinking, oh God, are they checking attendance? They're going to know that I didn't go. What are they going to think of me? And nobody, I ended up going to the same meeting 2 or 3 months later. And nobody said anything. They were just like, "Oh, hey, did you have a good summer? How you doing? Good to see you again." And I was like, "Oh, it's not about me here."
It's not about you. It's so great. Our egos, and my goodness, right? And yeah,
Uh,
being in those rooms really helps you understand your ego. I think that's
mm-hmm.
a gift. And I think, having more than one community is also a really good way to go.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you can kind of, sometimes you can build up some resentments. Maybe just something happens, but I think diversifying is also a good thing. For me, I have AA community. I also have, of course, a sober girls group that I belong to here in town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is purely social. And so that was another thing that was lacking in my life, was what do you do for fun in sobriety, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you do that, and what does it look like, and who will do that with you? And so finding support in that, so I could just start doing some of the things that I love to do, that may be in a drinking environment, but have the safety of a group of people around me to just hang with through the night, and leave when we want to leave. It's been a really good addition to my recovery program, for sure.
So, and I want to ask you about Boring Little Girls Club. It was suggested to me by a friend in Seattle, and she said, "Hey, you should reach out, and maybe there's somebody there who might want to talk to you." And that's what spurred me to look into it. And so, what is Boring Little Girls Club?
What are we? So we are a group of we are a group of women, trans, non-binary folks who get together in sobriety from alcohol or recreational drugs. And we do fun things together. We also do, with COVID, we have done some online, we've had to shift to online programming. We used to do social events within the community. For example, we had a disco night. We've had a love fest for Valentine's Day. We've put on shows with drag performances. We've done a lot of a variety of things. We've also done more, kind of community-based things. We recently had a clothing swap. We
Mm-hmm.
are starting a book club, which I will be hosting for the fall. And so anyone who is sober curious, or just wants to be sober for the night can join us. It's really about a group of folks getting together and just committing to being there in sobriety.
That's awesome. I think there's something, it's so important, the social aspect, and that it not having to be always recovery program based,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Not every time we get together does it have to be a book study. Book study is important. I find it valuable, but you don't always want to be in class, right?
No, and you want to discover different parts of yourself too, right? And so,
Yeah.
we're also going to be starting a softball team, and I have no idea how that's going to roll for me, but it's going to be a blast, right?
Right.
It's probably been 20 years since I've played softball, so we'll give it a go. But as you said, just and exploring different parts of ourselves in sobriety is really good, because we can get stuck under that title of addict, alcoholic, and we forget
Hmm.
that there's way more to us than that.
So can I ask you, I'm curious because I've talked to other people, and I have no problem saying I'm an alcoholic. And I think that it's been really important to, as a reminder of what I'm capable of, both negatively and positively. But I have had discussions with people over the use of that word. And some people think that it is not helpful and that it may even be harmful. I haven't found that in my life, but I'm just curious, you mentioned it earlier on that you're an alcoholic, and how you feel about the word itself.
Yeah, I've embraced it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I fought it for a long time because it has such a negative connotation, and I guess it made me have to have this negative lens of many, many, many people I loved and cared about in my life. And so I fought that word.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it comes right down to it, that at the bottom, at the end of the day, if I have one drink of alcohol, I will not stop until I am blackout drunk. I am, and that is the definition of alcoholic at its finest. And
Mm-hmm.
so I truly am that. And it was important for me to solidify in my own mind, like to be 100% sure. I just needed to label myself an alcoholic. I don't want my brain to start, I don't want to give it an inch of room to start telling me anything different, because it doesn't matter how long I'm in recovery. If I'm not working at it, my thinking goes silly and sideways, and that's part of being an alcoholic and an addict. We have to watch our thinking. We
Mm-hmm.
always will have to watch our thinking. But it also makes us really aware, sensitive, awesome, honest people. So, as arduous as it can be sometimes, I think it's kind of it's a small gift out of recovery that we actually get the opportunity to become better people.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and I love the way that you've been talking about, you say my brain and my thinking as if it is, it's not me, right? My thoughts are not me. There's this other, right? The consciousness, whatever I imagine it lives somewhere above my head. That's the best that I have, that I can imagine. But it's important, I feel, for me to remember that that's just my thinking, and that's my brain, and I can use it for good, and I can rewire it, and I can retrain it, and I can say no. And um another one of the little metaphors and thoughts and little things that I use is, do you remember a movie called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe about the mathematician, and he's a schizophrenic? I don't know if he's schizophrenic or multiple personality, or he has imaginary friends, right? Like de- it, I don't know exactly what the diagnosis was, but at
Yeah.
the end of the movie, and spoiler alert, for a movie from 2002 or something, but he sees these people, these imaginary friends that have caused him so much trouble and so much pain, and they're kind of over there in the corner, like saying, like, hey, we're here, do you want to hang out? And he kind of just looks at him and goes, no, not today. And that's kind of how I look at my alcoholism and my negative thoughts and my brain that is trying to tell me that it might be okay. And I go, oh, I know you. You're not, we're not hanging out today. We're not listening to you. That's great. I hear you. We're moving on. And I think it's so
Absolutely.
important to look at our brains as separate separate from ourselves, or rather just a single part of our whole being.
I think you said that really well. It's a really kind of abstract concept sometimes for people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean don't believe my own thinking? But I think if people really pay attention to their thoughts, they're going to see that there's usually a common narrative. It's usually not very positive, and it
Mm-hmm.
usually is all from the past.
Yeah.
And so it really doesn't have any relevance to what's going on today. Being in the present moment is really about ignoring that thinking, or not ignoring it. I'm not sure how we deal with it, but we just we acknowledge it. Sorry, we acknowledge it. We let it go off to the side, and then we carry on with what's relevant in the here and now today. But
Mhm.
it is an arduous task. but an important one, I think, for us folks in recovery, because yeah, keeping an eye on what's going on there. And if I'm taking care of myself well in all other aspects of my life, this tends to go a lot better. The thinking goes a lot better. So
Yeah.
it's all connected, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you struggle with today that you still struggle with today in sobriety?
Hmm. Discipline.
Okay.
I have to work really hard at doing the self-care pieces. Um, I can never wait till I feel like doing it. It is a mandatory thing for me. I have a schedule. It is written in my book that I exercise Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays, because if those things don't happen, then my thinking isn't as
Mm-hmm.
good. So I have I meditate, I exercise, I try and eat healthy. However, I still have a terrible sweet tooth. I love sugar. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are all the things that I have to do to keep well. I also remind myself every morning that I am an alcoholic. So I have some readings that I do every day, because I think it's important for me to know that for myself. And so, yeah, having a bit of spiritual time in the morning, taking care of my physical wellness, eating well, we're pretty good to go after that. So,
And
yeah, but
then,
making sure I do that is hard.
yes, discipline is important. I think I've heard it said that action dictates mood. And so I have to remember that whenever I'm feeling sluggish or low or there's a problem. My latest um, fix for that is to just go and do some push-ups until I can't, and then I'll do that, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, what was I concerned about? What was I bothered with? Because when I'm doing push-ups, there's not much else I can think about, right?
Oh, no, good for you. Whatever works, right?
Yeah,
Just figure it out.
yeah.
So,
Um, and then so I finally, where can people find Boring Little Girls Club, and how can they reach out and be a part of these things? Where are you're located? This is in Canada, right?
we're in Canada. We're in Calgary, Alberta, Canada,
Okay.
actually. So, yes, we are up here in the mountains. I don't know if you've ever driven through the Rockies, but you really should come on
Okay.
up here. Come on up.
Okay.
Yes.
I've been to Western Canada. I lived in Seattle for a very long time, so I've been to Victoria and Vancouver and even up to Nanaimo. But
Well done. Well done.
yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Vancouver Island is where I got well. I lived for 15 years. So
Okay.
special place in my heart for sure.
But Boring Little
Yes.
Girls Club is in Calgary, Alberta.
Boring Little Girls Club is in Calgary, yes. And so we are going to be hosting some online and in-person events over the next few months. You do have to check us out online.
Mm-hmm.
So going to boringlittlegirlsclub.com, we have a website, and there's a membership form that we ask you to fill out. Because once you join us, you will then have access and to be invited into all of our events. We just have, we have a safer spaces guideline, and we do need to know that people are comfortable around folks that are trans or non-binary. So we want to make sure that we have a safe and inclusive environment for anyone who identifies as female in our group.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you just get to hang out with a bunch of rad babes who do fun stuff.
That sounds great.
Right.
Brandy, thank you so much for your time and your story. And it was really great to listen to you and talk with you. And again, I'm just always, it's a good reminder to me when I can talk to somebody who I've never met and who comes from a vastly different background and go, yeah, that's me. That's me. That's me. So I really
Isn't it
appreciate your time.
amazing that the common threads that we have, and we get to be a part of this big club. But you know what I find, John, is these are really, a lot of this is just human nature, like
Yeah.
really accepting our humanness at its core, for all its ugliness, whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. And Boring Little Girls Club. I just thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John.
All right.
Take care.
You too.
Okay.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.